Hi, my name is Sam. I'm here to give my presentation on the policy advice on the large-scale operation against IS in both Iraq and Syria. Okay, so first some background information. The IS, or Islamic State, aka ISIS, or Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, is a transnational Islamic insurgent terrorist organization that has seized control over much of Iraq and Syria since 2013, bringing a large threat to the wider region. There is much debate over the degree of threat the IS represents to Australia as a terrorist group, or to Australian and allied facilities in the region. The first indication of the IS were in the form of small insurgency groups against the coalition forces in the Iraq War. When the coalition forces finally withdrew in 2011, the terror group extended control over major areas in both Iraq and now Syria. The IS has prospered in strangled tribal areas of Iraq and forced control over eastern regions of Syria weakened by civil war. In 2015, the IS, with support by organizations linked with the overthrown dictator Saddam Hussein, moved through and seized control over populations such as Mosul, Iraq's third largest city. Iraqi and Syrian adversaries alongside with some of US citizens have been brutally murdered in these events. The IS continued to launch offensives in Iraq, Anbar regions, and against Kurdish territories. The organization's movements have drawn international attention and has raised the Australian government's attention to Iraq's political adversary and to the turmoil in Syria. Although the Islamic State's organization is considered a direct threat to Australian security in the Middle East, it is unclear whether it currently poses a direct threat to Australian security. In November 2014, National Counterterrorism Centre Director Nicholas Rasmussen said in congressional testimony that the ISIL threat beyond the Middle East is real, although thus far limited in sophistication. However, if left unchecked, over time we can expect ISIL capabilities to mature and the threat to the Australian homeland ultimately to increase. Rasmussen recently estimated that there are more than 20,000 foreign fighters from as many as 90 countries, including more than 3,400 Westerners, that have travelled to Syria since 2013. According to Australian officials, many Australian citizens have travelled or attempted to travel to Syria to support armed groups there since the start of the Syrian conflict in 2011. And some of these are believed to have been there fighting since September 2014. Okay, my first policy is targeted airstrikes. These aim to degrade the Islamic ability to conduct offensives by attacking supply depots, supply lines, command centers, and troop concentrations. Reasonably speaking, the ADF, in cooperation with regional and global partners, could hope to sustainably hinder Islamic State's power projection ability and roll back its territorial gains, particularly in areas containing or bordering high concentrations of ethnic or religious minorities, where the ISIS rule is actively resisted. This will require not just the prudent use of aerial assists, but the coordination with various individuals and groups fighting Islamic State on the ground for the purpose of intelligence gathering. Potential costs and practical capabilities of this policy would have been estimated at a potential cost between $300 and $350 million per year. The Australian Defence Force has numerous Super Hornets and jet fighters, therefore making this course of action very possible. Okay, so policy number 2 is a ground invasion. Confine Islamic State's conventional military force to major population centres via a coordinated air campaign. Proceed to siege these areas with ground forces and prepare for a period of occupation and counterinsurgency before transition to local authorities and withdrawal. A combination of large-scale campaign of targeted airstrikes done by Australia and coordination with local militia groups will see the Islamic State's military isolated to urban areas. From there, in cooperation with our military allies, the ADF would assault and ultimately capture these areas, destroying the Islamic State's conventional military in the process. From then, a period of occupation will begin, with the ADF placed on counterinsurgency footing, pending the transition to a viable local authority. Only through the active military support of the US and regional powers such as Turkey and the GCC can Australia hope to eliminate the Islamic State's military capabilities. Tacit approval from Iran and major powers such as Russia and China would also be necessary to prevent the conflict from broadening. Potential costs and practical capabilities of this policy would have estimated potential costs between $400 and $500 million a year. Although Australia's relatively small armed force partnered with local militia groups and with support by our RAAF, Royal Australian Air Force, gives this course of action potential. Okay, lastly, my option 3, training and equipping. By bolstering local forces with military training and supplies, with the option of joint task forces until those forces are able to operate independently. Reasonably speaking, the ADF could hope to significantly improve the combat abilities of groups including the Iraqi army and various irregular forces, and thereby directly contest IS control on the ground without a long-running direct intervention. The outcome of the Australian and Allied forces strategies should rely upon the involvement of other actors, both state and not state. Australian officials will recruit a coalition of local forces and enlist Sunni and Iraqi Kurdish forces within Syria and Iraq and grant them a range of support. The training of Iraqi government, Iraqi Kurdish forces and Syrian rebels will be partnered with increased intelligence sharing and financial support, committing to curb the flow of resources and fighters to the IS. However, the effects of training and equipping should not be overestimated. An extensive and costly training mission backed up with billions of dollars of equipment amounted to nothing when the Iraqi army fled from the Islamic State initial advance into Iraq 2 years ago. Potential costs and practical capabilities. This policy's potential costs would be based on the extent of training Australia wishes to conduct. But to create a strong, well-supplied local force, it is estimated that the potential costs will be between $150 to $200 million a year, costing compared to the Iraq War in 2013. Australia is well capable of training and supplying local forces, making this action well possible. Okay, thank you. I'm Sam Bishop Taylor, and that is my policy advice on large-scale operations against IS in both Iraq and Syria.